All right, well, thank you all for being here. Test, test. I hope this is coming through back for you. You're good back there? All right, great. First of all, I am obliged to say I apologize for these screens. These are not my screens, and I even tried to do some calibration on them, and this is what it is, and I'll try to explain the differences as we go. It's difficult teaching color sessions in varied environments. So anyway, it seems like it goes without saying, but you know, being a colorist, it bothers me still, so okay. Thank you all for being here, and a lot of examples in this, we're going to talk about the process of color, will come from DaVinci Resolve and Adobe Premiere. I haven't got all the examples. I used to do a lot in Premiere, especially even short projects, and so I tried to make this a lot of examples. I don't know, attainable is not the right word, but these principles go across platforms. Okay, so I just haven't got them all updated to DaVinci Resolve. I've got a few examples that we can look at from that though, okay? Feel free to raise a hand, ask questions throughout if you want, and if we're gonna still get to it, I'll defer an answer to that point. But I'm here to help and be collaborative on this. So color is a intricate process that there's so many ways to do kind of the same thing, all right? So happy to hear questions and dialogue about that. To get started, this is a quote from Peter Jackson that says, "Color actually affects the mood of the film. It affects the experience of watching the film just as the sound effects can, or the visual effects, or the acting. The color is often overlooked, but it is a key part of the creative process to a finished film." Thank you, Mr. Jackson, for recognizing the importance of color. And unfortunately, it is the case that a lot of times money has been spent trying to get a film made and then even trying to get post done. And by the time you get down to color on the lower budget into Spectrum, sometimes we're running a little low in the gas tank on finances. But anyone who's in a director, producer position or making films, I would encourage you to think about this, reserve those funds, hold on to those funds so that those resources are there when you get to the end. First of all, when it comes to color, if you're also a one-man band or doing video projects, be sure to white balance. Fix it in post doesn't fix as well as we would all like to think. And if you do things correctly on set, it goes a long way in making the job easier for all disciplines, but even with color. Indoors, outdoors, change those white balance settings. I just got some things recently that I was working on where people didn't change. You've got orange color inside, blues outside, and those just get harder to make look as natural as we would like for them to if you just shoot it right to begin with. Work to get what you want in camera on set as much as possible. That's even beyond white balance. Okay, but all right, let's assuming we're past all of that down to the color process. Let's talk about color standards. It's important to know that any and every display will look different, even made by the same manufacturers and models. You just have to go by the TV lineup wall at Walmart to just see the varied settings, I guess we could even call it, or just the display variants. So it's important when doing color to have a common standard to know that what you're looking at is at least a semblance of correct, and then you have to account for all the other different applications of how it will be viewed and try to find a mix and a balance for the audience's experience. For example, the two colors in the middle are actually the same color. It's easy for our brains to be impacted by context. Well, let me see here. No, okay, it works here on these screens too. I mean, it looks great here. I should just turn this around and show you the MacBook screen, you know, but they're actually the same color. So the surrounding environment matters when you're doing color grading. If you're going for technical excellence, and that matters more the higher budget stuff you work on, can be less so the smaller things you work on. But usually when color grading in a dark room with as white lighting behind things, you just don't want bright colored walls. You wouldn't want to color grade with your monitor against this wall, you know. So just take into context your environment as you're grading. Even when I'm sending things to a client to view, I ask them to come back with notes. This doesn't look, I'm like, okay, let's also talk about how are you watching? What lighting are you sitting in the middle of your living with all the, what is that light? Because all those surrounding colors impact the way our eyes auto-adjust to color to see what is true white and what we're looking at. So take that into consideration as you're looking at how you're viewing your work. You can use things like X-Rite. There's other companies that make these kind of things that can calibrate your screens. These can be helpful for display screens, your monitors. This is kind of a cheaper, simpler way to do it. There's other companies, BenQ. There's some other ones that make some lower end, several $100s affordable monitors that are calibrated, calibrating screens. You can go all the way up to really expensive HDR monitors that cost tens of thousands of dollars, and you can, on panels and all this. You don't have to have all of these things to do great color. This is my setup, or part of it. I have a medium-sized panel that does help speed up the work process. I didn't start with this. I started with simpler things, even just a mouse, and then upgraded very slowly over time to different pieces. So I have a Flanders Scientific 24-inch monitor that I use that's been calibrated. And you think with Flanders, they're in Atlanta, and I've taken it back to Atlanta because we're near Atlanta, and let them calibrate it again for me just to make sure that things are within standard. But what this gives me confidence in is that what I see on this monitor, we have sent to theater for films, and I go sit in the theater and I look at it, and it's exactly the way we expected it to be. So this gives me that confidence for a client to say, if we like it here, we know we'll like it on the screen there, and reduces all of that amount of risk. Now, does it look the same on the iPad and the iPhone? And then we have to work out all of those things too. But being able to know that is helpful in delivering a service to a director for a film that they are trying to be a steward of the funds that have been invested. You're serving all the way back up the chain, the project that someone is bringing to you, or the client you're working with, and whatever that may be, right? Okay. Let's talk about a few tools. I know we had some hands raised. Some people are already familiar with this. We're going to go over it again. We got a decent number of hands that aren't familiar with this. We're going to go over a number of these. This is kind of like flying a plane by instrument. You don't want to always just trust your eyes or your brain. There's an important element of that too as you're color grading, but at the end of the day, you also need your monitors to be able to tell you what's true and what's not. And it's also helpful as you're trying to problem solve. So we'll talk about a couple of these. Waveform monitor, here a little bigger. The top is represented as white. The bottom line down here is representative of black in your image. What's bright, what's dark. This goes across a bunch of different programs, okay? So here's an example of an image. You can see, and then it reads left to right. So this arch across is going to be the sky. Part of the images that are dark, the image that are darker are going to be lower. You can see the sunken bits here. Those are going to be those fence posts. So it represents left to right, and the brightness of that image as you go across, right? So you can see up here is sky, and down here you have the fence posts, for example. And then you kind of look in the middle, like the other kind of grouped bunched bit is going to be like her hair there because it's darker, that area of the screen. And this is how you can help read an image and how bright things truly are, even as you start making adjustments. Make sense? Okay. Here's another example where this little bit on this line here is actually the text. Usually I turn the text off because it throws off. But just for this example, it was helpful to say these dashed lines that are really consistent across, it's about on the 90 level, is going to be that text. And then you can see all the streaked versions underneath that. That's actually the Living Waters text behind, because it's on that side of the screen. And it trickles down like this because there's actually a gradient. It's not a solid color there. So you can read how bright that is. You can see there where his face is. You'll be able to read it's between right about the 70-ish line. Then there's this jacket, and then a lot of the background is very dark. You can see that sitting lower across the bottom. Okay. Oh, I have arrows that here. Oh, see, I've got, okay. There you go, that points, so I don't have to point. All right. So that's kind of how you read a waveform. And then there's the vector scope. This is one of the other important ones. And this is just a circle of colors that go around: red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and magenta. And these are offsetting complementary colors across the circle. But you can look at an image like this and see which colors in your image are stronger, which ones are less, and then it's going to help you as you correct. So you can see it's pushing into the red. I'll get to this other point. Between the yellow and red, there's definitely a lot of him in there. You also have a strong blue and cyan, which are going to be those curtains. There's not a lot of magenta and there's not a lot of green, so it's going to be more towards the center on those. For example, if I push it, you can see how it expands out. That means those colors are more saturated. When it's black and white, everything disappears, goes in the middle. The more in the middle, the more black and white or neutral those colors are. Okay, so that's why when you look at, it's not magenta and green, those are more towards the center because they don't represent it. There's also what's called a skin tone line. This is between yellow and red, and this is extremely helpful as you look at, skin tone, and trying to balance that and make sure those are the right colors and not, generally speaking, without the exceptions of story reason, you're not pushing those into weird things. Okay, so that's a helpful metric as you're grading and going, what's wrong? Well, go check your vector scope and see which way it moves as you move things around, okay? Here's another example. This one has a lot of orange in it, but you can see where the skin tone line is. It's definitely got a lot of trace, that's what it's called, the green stuff over there. All the way down to the cyan, which is represented strongly, which is going to be in the sky. Okay, here's another example. You've got a lot of red going on here, which is those boxes. This doesn't read left to right or up or down. This is just saturation of colors in the image. And you got boxes back here. Down here, you've got some of the cyan, which is from this, again, name title that really shouldn't be on there while you're color grading, it's just for examples, right? And then you have strong yellow, which is coming from those colors in the background. And we've got skin tone tracing right there on that line, tracking there on that line as well. So it's kind of vector scope. Make sense? Questions? All right. Then we have what's called the RGB parade, which is basically your waveform squished and narrowed into 3 different columns of red, green, blue. So you can see that how it goes up and down. So this represents the saturation of a color in the brightness of the area. So it reads like your waveform, but it's these specific colors. So you can see, let's see if this moves around when I do this. All right. Well, so I exaggerated. I pushed it in saturations for exaggerated purposes to help here. You can see how in the brightness over on the red, when I push that, the red is spiking up and flatlining. That's not good. But for this example, it tells you the red is really saturated in the highlights. And then you're going to get highlights in the blue. It's showing you there's not a lot of green in the highlights. And then the bottom, it's bottoming out too much. Again, it is an extreme. And then when it's looking more neutral or accurate, we go black and white. It doesn't all disappear like the vector scope did, but it balances across. They all are the same level, which means there's no bias or further push. They're all the same level, which brought it back to black and white. So if you're trying to white balance, this can be a helpful one to find a gray area or a white area of your image, find that represented in your waveform, go look at your parade and see which one's out of whack and go, oh, it's too much blue over in that area. So you start balancing that back. You can watch it move, and when you move, they all start moving around, and you go, oh, they level out. It helps you white balance. Not black and white balance, but white balance. Okay. Does that one make sense? Follow? Okay. These are all just tools to help you as you're figuring out what you want to do. Okay, then there's color wheels. And again, a lot of these are from Premiere because I've done a lot of short stuff in Premiere, and it's also simplified. The stuff in DaVinci has a lot more numbers and dials and things in there. So, but usually there's a pretty general sense of highlights, midtones, and shadows. And then it does expand and get more complex into other applications if you want to do that. But these are the 3 areas that you usually are going to use to adjust the blacks, whites, mid-grays in your image. Brightness level and color. If you are in Premiere, which kind of nobody really, very rarely are, or other applications, I guess you could even take this into apps and on your phone. They've got all kinds of sliders and adjustment things you can do now. All right, this could translate into that where you have tint, temperature, everything sliders even on simplified versions of things. Even an iPhone app editing thing, you can do this kind of stuff in there now. There's also RGB curves, which is one I'll often use as you're starting to finesse and do tweaks of things. The only thing I guess I'll say about these is a lot of times they'll have a little eyedropper in a corner to try to help you select. There's nothing wrong with doing that to try to find white and autocorrect back. It doesn't always work very well. So just keep the undo button handy. You go, it goes crazy, and you're like, okay, we'll do it ourselves then. But I have had it work sometimes and go, ooh, that helped gauge and kind of, sometimes even it's just an inspiration idea of like, where do I go with this? What do I want to do with it? And just getting some ideas, I've had it be helpful for that. And then there's usually like a pin or a dot in the middle of this wheel, and you can drag it toward one of these colors. That's also the same thing as like your vector scope. Colors are the same place of the wheel. You can drag in the direction you want to go. Watch your vector scope. It's very helpful in balancing images or doing looks. Okay. Oh, well, there we go. Here's that. I don't know that I have a whole lot to say about the sliders. Good luck. Usually when you're in an application with sliders, you don't have the waveforms and monitors and things to look at, like in the apps and on your phone, whatever. In Premiere, you can do it this way, and it does put up the monitors as well, but it's not the most ideal. But again, it can work. Let me talk and explain. Anybody not familiar with RGB curves? Not familiar? A quick explanation? Okay, I'll go over this quickly. So the way the curves work is the pin in the top right here represents bright. Down here represents black, so it's going to follow your waveform top to bottom. And then you also can do individual colors of red, green, blue, and I don't have the different images. So if you drag this pin over, it's going to spike that color in the highlights because you're on the high end of the spectrum. And if you were to drag it down, it reduces red in the highlights, which then introduces green. That's the opposing color. And if you were to take the white one, which is the brightness value, and you drag it over, it will brighten your image. And if you take the dark one and drag it over, it will darken your image. So it's the bright, the dark, and then those colors correspondingly. Again, you can go to Wave RGB Parade, and you can use these then to drag across and help balance. So, and then you can pinpoint in between and do curves and do other things and get really complex and fun. But that's the simple explanation of what the RGB curves do, and there's a lot of precision to it that's very helpful. Okay, those are some of the tools. Any questions? You have a question? Yes.
What does it do when you put the red and green and blue? What does it do when you put it on the lines and stuff?
When you put them on the lines, you can put points on the line and drag it to reduce that color in that area of the image, or push it up and increase the color in that area of the image.
So is it all, if both of the colors are down, does that mean it's all those colors?
If both the colors are down, is it all the colors? That's a complicated answer because the opposite of other colors then get introduced. I'll talk to you more about it. This is my son back here. I'll talk to you about it more later, buddy. Okay, so color correction and grade ideally happens after the project has been approved, edit has been locked, and they pinky swear, cross their fingers they're never going to unbreak the lock and fix it again. Okay, because it gets all kinds of fun when they inevitably have to make changes. That's probably a topic for another time if you want to talk about how to solve that. But that's the process. I do get this question of when do you do color grading? You do not want to be doing color grading while the edit is going on. You want to finish all of that, know which shots are going to be used, which shots are not going to be used, and then you'll take the project, simplify it all down, and only grade just the shots you have to, because it's a lot of work. You want to match all of these things and remove the confusion, simplify it down, only grade what you have to, and then don't change things. You still, especially in documentary, this would be very common to be like, well, we found a new stock shot. We found a new thing here. We want to change this shot. So there's going to be some things that have to swap out. We get VFX back and narrative. VFX has to come in. That's a whole process of how do you send to VFX? How do you get it back from them? Generally speaking, after the project's done and approved. What you'll want to do is, when working on a project, I'll pick a few wide shots, hero shots, main shots, what do you want to call them, from a few different scenes, kind of a cross-section across the film. I'll do 2 or 3 different looks across these, send those off to a director and say, what do you think? And he usually hates all of them. But it's a conversation point to say, less of this, more of that. Not that, we like this. This is a good direction, don't ever do that again. But you're trying to get a feel for across the film, what's the mood. I have to look at the director's lookbook, the DP's mood book, trying to get a feel for what do all of these things mean to them, because everybody uses different terms and different things to mean different things, because it's all so subjective. So just trying to find main wide shots. It's almost like filming. Start with your master, and then you go in for coverage. Same thing with color. You're going to start with wides, and once you have your wide established, color graded, you'll move in and make sure everything matches to that. Okay. And okay, so as we continue, so to grade a shot, first you correct contrast. Make sure that the shadows, midtones, and highlights are where they need to be properly for that image. Because as you apply color, it will apply to shadows, mids, and highlights. And then if you go back and say, oh, it should be darker, well, now the colors you said should be in the darks are not in the right place, and it gets wonky. Color and wonky are two words that I like putting together, I guess. So just make sure that the contrast, the exposure, luminance of the image is correct. Keep an eye on your waveform. Here's an example. This was not shot on high-end cinema cameras. This is not log or raw. So it had kind of a look in it. But this is how the waveform, oh boy. All right, well, just bear with me on this, okay? You'll get the idea. Okay, so you can see it's topping out at the top because there's the waveform, so it's clipping. Again, this isn't log footage. This is a run-and-gun documentary, shot this on the fly. Very common. Something's gonna blow out, especially when you don't have control over the lighting. And you can see it's lifted off the bottom, so the blacks aren't very dark, you know, and so that's all kind of washed out in this mid. So the first thing I wanna do is adjust contrast down. And so there's just a little bit that starts to touch the bottom. We don't need to, it depends on the look. So I'm gonna speak generally, and then there's always exceptions to everything. In this case, we didn't wanna crush it out. We're trying to retain just a little bit of highlight. So I brought it down just so it came off the top line just a little bit. If you bring blown out whites, if you bring them down too far, they get gray, muddy, it looks weird, something's wrong, nobody knows what. Candles will do this often. So I just brought in just enough to just make sure we're retaining as much as we possibly can around the edges of the trees to get as much back as we could, and that's all you could do. Correct contrast. Then what you're going to want to do is correct color, and this is balancing the image. Again, it comes in all over the place, especially when it's run and gun documentary work. So this was easier because these shirts, or at least this guy's shirt, is supposed to be gray. It's helpful when you have kind of a neutral intended color largely represented. Not always the case. This case was better. And you can look across that, you know, there's going to be kind of, because it's a little bit of a mid brightness, so it's going to be represented across, you know, kind of in this mid-range. So you can kind of see this clumping on the right edges of the image, and it is not balanced very well at all. It's, you know, blues down here, reds up here, which is mean that's, you know, elevated in the image. So, here we go. There it is, greens, blues, all right? So once you balance it, now it looks more gray, and you can see those bunches are now lined up more evenly across in that area, and the shirt looks more neutral. Okay, so just balancing the image is important. Yes?
So you want all those bunch colors to be like on the same line?
If you want the color those represent to be neutral. So I don't want, if I find their faces, I don't necessarily want their faces to be all lined up, because then their face is gone black and white or neutral, you know? So you're just finding, like this kid's shirt that's brown shouldn't be lined up neutral. His was easy because he had a nice large gray shirt in the image. So it made a good example to explain this as well. But yeah, neutral colors, that's what you want to be balanced. You often will look at your highlights, you'll look at the shadows, and try to balance that so those neutralize out, and then you have your variety of color in between. But just even basic balancing helps. And then you'll work into, yes?
How often do you have to step away from like to take a break to like come back?
All the time. Yeah, I'm always, just to be honest, all right, I'm always afraid when I go to bed at night that I'm gonna walk in the next day and hate everything I did the day before, okay? It really is this subjective, and I walk back, when I do walk back in and go, oh, it's not too bad. I'm like, I feel so much better about that day. It's just common. It is good to take a break because your eyes do adjust constantly to try to neutralize the image for you. So it's, there's no right or wrong to that, but it's definitely don't take what you did in one day and send that out necessarily. Like you want to give it a little bit of time to come back and reevaluate and scrap it and start over if you need to. I've done that plenty of times, or just tweak and, you know, balance it. Yeah. It's not, yeah. Other questions? Just a minute.
This is probably an easy one, but how do the shirts change? Like, this is red. Why is it gray?
Right, because you move the things in the wheels around to the other color. So if it was red, you move it to the other side, and it starts to change the color.
Dark red.
D- Well, well, you got good questions, buddy. Luminance value can impact the saturation of colors. That's a little bit more in depth. We can talk about that one later too.
Gray goes to red, so it changes red.
No, I'll talk to you more about it, okay? All right, you got good questions though. All right, so then this balances out here across these three. Here's a tip. You have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The slide before, obviously, they're getting light from the side, so it's obviously sunset time.
Right.
Would you rather have white balanced image because it's gonna go back to the orange
Right.
tone anyway, because that's the real way, right?
Right.
But so when you receive the image, would you rather have the camera set at the sun like 32 Kelvin,
Right.
rather than like 40, 42 or a little bit of?
Sure. Would you rather have, in a sunset example kind of like this, because the sun's coming in strongly, would you rather have the camera balanced in camera for a neutral tone or accepting of the, yeah. Yeah, I would prefer that the camera is balanced for what the DP is intending it to look like in the end. So if we want to be accepting of the sunlight, or the sunset, sunrise, whichever, yeah, I would go with that. How much you balance an image can depend on the shot you're working with. You have to take all of that into consideration. It's more trying to find where the neutral tones are and making sure you have some level of standard that you're working from to say, okay, the highlights may be more golden than is normal, but does that mean this color that's grayish, how much is that affected? And I do find it's helpful to balance back more and then come back and apply your grade or balance back to whatever the shot is going to be. But that's a little bit of an open hand, I think, as well, trying to figure out when you have those extreme situations to deal with, how much do you balance back and then come back? This just proved a good example because it was a big gray shirt to then balance it. And then as we get to grade, I bring it back more towards the sunset look. Because this wasn't the look I'm going for. This is just balancing the image. And then what you would do in a scene is you would try to make sure this balances with the next shot. It sometimes helps me go back to adjusting your contrast of highs, mids, and darks. Sometimes I'll turn it black and white to then be able to see the waveform, and then I just balance the exposure with a black and white image because the color is not tricking your brain into it being brighter or darker because those things also affect it. So I've found that to be a helpful thing is just turn it black and white so I don't see all the sunset, sunrise. Balance the brightness, then come back, turn it on, balance if I want to. It's a bit of depends on the situation, kind of. Okay, so when you're trying to match shots, and this is already once a grade has been applied, focus on, so on the left-hand side is before with a basic 709 conversion out of, this is red raw, 709, and then this is the graded version on these monitors. So, but what I'm trying to match shots, matching shots is the hardest part of color grading to me. Balancing one image, making it look great, doing your hero shots, your wides, and making it look all pretty, great. The hard part is now matching a scene and matching the movie. That's a majority of your work is going to be that. So what do you look for when you're trying to match? One, to me, is trying to match skin tone. So you can see here, like well, maybe you can see. The colors are different between these two different angles. I can't remember if they had two cameras on this shoot. I don't remember if this was shot two different cameras. Even with two of the same model of red camera or whatever it is, there's going to be variations even between the two. So you've got to do a lot of shot matching, whereas they're much closer once you're over here. So once you're going to try to match the wide, or the close to the wide, I want to look at his skin tone. First and foremost, I'm trying to match skin tone. That's where the eye usually is looking. They're looking at characters, they're looking at characters' eyes. As shots change, you want that to not be distracting. And if the outside of that changes more, then that's more okay and acceptable. It's a conversation with the DP and director. But matching skin tone is important, really above everything else. And then the other thing, if you're just having trouble getting it to work, look at matching, this says matching significant colors. This is a little bit so there's a bit of a green push in this guy's jacket. And let's say, for example, in this film, the color of his jacket is a story element. We're going to need this jacket to match across the scene. This can be a variety of different elements, whether it's product packaging, and commercial stuff, or thematic colors for certain characters. Let's just say it's this guy's jacket. So next I would go to the important things for story-wise that need to match. Make sure those things are matching across. The other thing is to look at your highlights. So I'm going to look at this guy's jacket and make sure that this variation they've got here is better as you go between, because subconsciously your brain starts taking in the other information around that image and saying, what is this? Does this feel the same? And then last but not least, and not necessarily entirely always the brights or the darks in this order, but one of the other things to look at is shadows. So it's going to be this guy's hat is supposed to be more of a neutral black color in his hat. And so I would, and you can see there's different pushes and things there. There's a little bit of variation here, but you're also going from a wide, which allows for more haze, and the contrast is generally close-ups, adjust all these things. But in a general color tone, we're in the same color range, and it feels like we've gotten closer, and it works better. So those are some areas to look at if you're trying to match and having trouble. Find those particular points there. Okay, that's correcting color. We jumped around a little bit. It's a little hard in teaching color to be a linear entire process here. Okay, so then you grade the scene. Okay, let's go back here. This is the color balanced image where we talked about this. And then this is the graded version, which doesn't look great here. But it went back warmer, okay? And even in the gray shirt, we didn't mind if that pushed back into more of an orange color. And you can see the balance is now back off. It's still different than it was before, though. Sometimes what I'll do, once you have a graded or a matched scene, a technique, there are varieties of these. In DaVinci, you can do groups. You can't do groups in Premiere. Even outside of that, in DaVinci, I'll often use adjustment layers. This gets tricky, especially in Resolve, because it doesn't play nice with being able to select the clip, and then it wants to adjustment layer, and it throws you back to and it's difficult. So I do this kind of last if I have to. I see them nod their head. They're looking at. But it can be a very helpful technique in applying, because you can take an adjustment layer, put it on top, same in DaVinci, and then you can grade that adjustment layer as a clip, and it sees through down to the clip underneath. So especially in Premiere, I would do this because you're trying to get groups and scenes. All right, I'll show you one from DaVinci here in a minute too. So here's the whole clip from the original balance or contrast balanced back to a look. So there's still quite a bit of difference between these two. Why go balanced before you're going to do sunset? It's still different, and it still allows more control and intentionality of what we're trying to do. And it really is hard. Usually when I get upside down on something, it's because I skip some of this process and I try to go straight from here and start skipping things, and I go, that's not working. You have to scrap it, start over, and I go, okay, do the process. And it helps. Here's just an example before and after, which if I had better projectors and screens, we would sit and stare at more. But here's another example from a short film I did. This was a simple thing, so we did it right in Premiere. The top is the original, then I just primary correction. Then from primary correction, we went to actually balanced correction. Again, I'm using a lot of sliders and stuff just to try to show an example that can be done this way. And then from correction, we went to grade. So we came back to a warmer color. The bright white helped, in balancing things, but then we're introducing it back again, and it's not as blown out as this all looks. All right, that wasn't part of the look. Here's an example of the adjustment layer. So this is a scene from Disciples in the Moonlight. They had this kind of flashback moment, and they wanted it to be real stylistic. So here's the before. It's the beginning of the shot. I threw this in last minute, so I don't have a great example of their faces because it tilts up to them and it's better. But okay, so here's before, and there's after, where it's real kind of glowy and fuzzy, and you can tell where it spins out on the edges, more and more anamorphic-y kind of look that we added in post. This was just for a specific piece here, and instead of doing it in a group, this I actually did do in an adjustment layer right inside the timeline, and it laid over in and it allows you can fade things in and out. You can just handle it a little differently. So again, there's just different ways to do things sometimes. There's not a right or wrong. I do want to emphasize in color because I get all up in my head about things still, and it's always good for me to remind myself that there's not right or wrong necessarily. If it looked good and it's working, it's okay. Just keep trying and learning and growing because there's, anyway. All right, so once you've graded a scene, then you've got to match the movie. Now your scene's got to work across the whole thing. This is a short film, but you can see here's kind of a snapshot. This is before, and then this image after, this image after, this image after. That one's a small touch-up, so there's not always the same level. Small touch-up. And then this was blue, definitely went warmer to try to match the scene movie overall, even in a short film. Here's an example of a larger section from Washington's Armor. This is before, and you can see there's a lot of haze in this scene, so the contrast, there's a lot of variation in contrast. And here, let me show you an after here to just bring this overall, we had a historical, a little bit of a greenish tint kind of throughout feel. Here's another one from Washington's Armor where it was an action scene. Those get really fun because you've got GoPro going, you've got red cameras, you've got other cameras because things were shot all over, drone footage, underwater tanks, above water, on a river, and so there's all this stuff shot in, I think we shot in like 4 different locations to put this sequence together. So this is how documentary feels more, like this is, it feels more eclectic like this. And then when we're done, it feels more cohesive and it's all together because you don't want it to be distracting. And there's even visual effects that went into this sequence to match snow that was falling and ice on the river and so forth. Here's another example of matching. Some of these are just commercial projects. But again, we're getting interviews, so this is more of a documentary feel. You've got more outdoors. They shot stuff on helicopters, a lot of different formats, and different, like even these orange that's in here, some of the notes where we don't want the orange to stick out too much, so you're trying to blend all of this back across in a palette that feels more cohesive this way so that the film has a tone overall. This is where a lot of the work is. In Disciples in the Moonlight, I don't have an example because it's more recent enough to put in, that I put in here. We did a lot of work of establishing Disciples in the Moonlight. A lot of it takes place at night. So what is the color of moonlight? For this film, it's going to be blue, teal, and we had a hero image, and we judged almost every scene, split screen, back across to say, does it match? Is it the same? Do we want that to be consistent throughout the movie? Because it's so prevalent to make sure that the film feels cohesive, and you don't suddenly get a little bit more of a magenta in there, or it gets a little more cyan, or a little too yellow. It just throws off the world, and you want it to feel as cohesive of a film and story. Here's an example of something I shot where I forgot to white balance. Because it does happen. That's why I said it at the beginning, because I'm guilty of this. So first you had to balance it back to, again, the wedding dress is supposed to be white. And then this is the grade where we have a vignette. I was going to try to explain away why I forgot to white balance, because I did properly white balance, then we changed the lighting setup, and it doesn't matter. There's always reasons why you make mistakes. But here's another one from the same scene. The original image, balanced it back, contrast everything we want it to be, and then the grade and the glow and the warm colors and the vignette and stuff we had on there. Let me see here on, these are just kind of fun. All right, let's look at this one here. I found these in trailers from one of the Kendricks films, an early trailer that didn't have color applied, or just basic color was applied, and then the film came out and they updated it all in the trailer. I took advantage and took some before and afters just for a study to see, like this is more of a, this is how the movie ended up with color, and this was just an original basic look, kind of probably a 709 kind of conversion thing. And I was just, they did a lot of work on set. There's still a blue push already coming in from the left side. There's a warm push coming in from the right side. So they were already working on set. They didn't come to a color later and say, we decided we want that side to be warm and that side to be blue, and the lights are all neutral. That's a nightmare. In this kind of scene especially, where you have such strong blues and you're trying to then fix things, and then the warm light behind him has skin tone, and there's cabinets behind the actor's face and they're all the same tone. Can you add some separation and depth? Sure. All right, let me get in here and let's find some options. But you'd rather that they just darkened it on set or moved them somewhere else or painted the cabinets a different color or something, right? And this is, I think, just from color, story-wise, how many have seen Fireproof? Most, some, right? It's like, you remember, you haven't, okay, I know this guy back here. You haven't seen Firebird? Okay, he has, he mentioned it. So the cold color, so there's also, in this point in the story, there's a contrast between the relationship of him and his wife. There's warm coming in on his side. This is where he feels in the story. He's warm, welcoming, candlelight. He's setting this table. On the other side, where there's an empty chair, there's cold. Now, it's also explainable that this could be coming from the kitchen, which is often indoor lighting, which would be more warm. That's probably a window and it's blue. So it's natural seeming, but it's also story. And to accentuate that was the colorist job. This was on purpose. Let's make sure that's warmer. Let's make sure that's colder, because it adds to the story as she walks in and decides she doesn't care about this table he's setting, and she leaves the scene. And he's just left there with whatever the food, I mean, he was just, So here's another one where it was kind of normal. This is, comes out of the scene, and this is a warmer, a little bit glowier, romantic moment. This was part of this point in the story for her in the scene. So making sure the reds and the roses were the right color, making sure her hair had color. This is gonna be some of the notes, I'm imagining, but lending itself to that story and helping in that way. Here's the same thing I found from one of the National Treasure movies. I found a trailer before and after, early and later, and this is just fine, but they decided they wanted a more cold technology look in this scene. So they pushed the skin tones more. There's a bluer tint coming in this way. There's color contrast, which is another topic you can look at. But so they're still warm and cool. This one is just fine. I mean, I think we'd all love to have this horse and cannons kind of scene in our movies. But it was a flashback bit. They pushed it more historical, a little more of the papyrus almost, or a sepia kind of look to it. This is a great film. They pushed it even stronger in this flashback moment. I just found it interesting to just see kind of what they ended up with some things there. Question? Okay. Here's a documentary, just as an example of some before and afters. These are, like this guy down here doesn't have he needs some help with some saturation. This one was shot with, what do they call the sodium vapor lights, okay? So they had a strong, like oranges outdoors and something else that's purple, and it just doesn't match. This guy in the middle has a better skin tone. Ron Paul over here is really washed out, and some of these windows are more blown out in this image than they really are, so you have to then work on balancing these. Yes?
Does the workflow for color correcting change much in working within a live production environment?
I haven't done color in a live production environment. I mean, I know they do DIT and they have a guy that does some stuff. Is that what you're talking about? Somebody that's working with them, or?
I just saw the news, it's something with like news.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure they have some stuff that's kind of preset, pre-baked in, so that can all be, yeah, they'll have some things dials and things they can do. I've worked in some of that kind of environment, and they've got big decks that you can tweak a lot of these things on per camera to help them match. Before things start, they'll put up the color bars, they'll have all this stuff going out on screens, goes out on cameras, and they go and dial it all in to make sure it all matches so that, yeah, when it's live coming through, it all matches. And it all looks seamless. Like NFL games or TV broadcasts, yeah, they're gonna match all that stuff ahead of time. Yeah, and they got big decks or maybe software now. I mean, it's been a while since I've been. Yeah, so this is before and after on this one. I'm gonna step through these. Brightening this guy up, again, bringing some saturation back here, toning back some of the warm, bringing back some blue, helping some of the skin tone, helping some of the skin tone, helping some of the skin tone. That one was pretty minor. This one, we just decided to own, we had to pick one side or the other. Do you wanna go blue or warm? Because it was, whoopsie. All right. I can't go back and forth between these two. All right. So we just went warmish yellow and just kind of owned this outdoor sodium vapor light. Warmed up this one, and then definitely helped this guy to help the documentary interviews. On docs, I start with interviews, make sure that's the basis, okay? And make that sure that it looks good, that people are gonna be looking at a lot, and then I'll do B-roll after that. But I want to make sure the people look great. Here's another National Treasure, kind of a greenish hue, and then they went colder and matched all of these before and after, just kind of the final look. I have a bunch of other examples of before and after things. Let me see what else I had down here. Let me talk about, all right, here's one. All right, I did Polycarp, which was a really fun film. We did a biblical thing. Here's a scene that I did for one of my very, very, very first feature films that I did color on forever ago. And this is how the footage all came in. They hadn't white balanced any of the cameras for interior. This was not intentional. anyway. Actually, on this screen, you can see more into this image than you normally would. This is really dark, this library bit. This one is a really nice image here in the bottom right corner. The lighting, the soft. You've got a great start here of separation, but it doesn't match and the color's off. So there was a lot of work to try to bring, this is all shot on DSLRs, this was a while ago. And so trying to bring this up, you could only bring it forward so much before it got all grainy and yucky. This one, like her skin tone is very similar to this post behind her. That was really hard to bring some separation. But you know, here's the work to try to match. This is a whole scene, like where they walk around and talk about all this. And it, all right, I'm gonna stop complaining about the TVs. Anyway, that's just, all right, so that's, here's before and here's an after. I felt this was a really satisfying one once we put enough together, and the director was like, wow, you really helped on this. This was the easiest one to fix because the lighting already had the separation through the scene of her against the background. That really matters, and great DP's work goes a long way in getting color. Let's talk about secondaries. So once you've graded, secondaries is part of a grade or look. Yes, move back.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, sure, go ahead, sorry.
How do you work well with, if there's RGB lighting in the footage? I've worked with it before and it's really difficult, so how would you work around that, especially if you're trying to create a specific look?
With RGB lighting,
You're talking about on set?
Yes.
what do you,
Like,
yeah,
if there's like a red light
oh,
or
sure.
blue or green or yellow, like, on the, how would you work with that?
Let me make sure I understand the problem. What is the problem you're facing with those strong colors?
When you're trying to get like a specific look,
Yeah,
then it affects the other
I see.
colors on the side.
yeah, great. That is a great question for secondaries. So what you do is once you kind of have your general look going, again, unfortunately, I'll plug this again at the end. I have a whole breakdown on a project I did just like that, where it was a live stage production that they filmed and then went to theaters with. And that's a great example where they had wild colors going on. Not wild as in crazy, but they just had strong, it's a stage production, they had strong colors. And when they filmed it, the camera sensors didn't understand that that color was supposed to be a different, the purples, the blues, the reds didn't look the same in camera as they looked on stage. Which I think they probably would have been better served to pay attention to that on set and actually tweak the color on stage, which looked weird to them then in person, but then would look correct. What we ended up doing was spending a lot of time selecting each of those individual colors and then pushing them back into what they wanted it to be, the blue, the purple, and I hadn't seen the live stage. I had nothing to reference, so you had to talk to the director, and he goes, this one's wrong, that one's not, all right? And they had big scenes that meant things, it was story motivated, and they were very strong color casts. So you just have to select those things specifically and then move those around to what they should be. Yeah, I'll just summarize it with that one. So in secondaries, and this is, I'm going to skip this because it's a Premiere example. Very similar though in DaVinci, there's a section where you can select colors and then you can use things like this, hue, saturation, and luminance. And these will spread out and you can do softness you can select just a specific area. You can turn off some of there's all these different complications you can do with this to select just what you want. And then the correction you apply there will only apply to what you've selected. For example, this is also one of the films I did forever ago, Pendragon with Aaron Burns, and this is the before image, and then this is after. Well, so it was warm, right? And they wanted, or cool, and they wanted it to be warm. But when we warmed it up, the shield and the flag and her dress went with it. And they said, no, her color's blue. So we had to go in and do selections on just the shield, and it kind of went together because they're all similar blues. But they wanted to make sure that blue stood out separately and didn't. You'll do this with skin tone a lot of times. You'll push something a direction, and the skin goes with it, and you go, ugh, that's too blue, too green, whatever. You got to go select the skin and then bring it back to what you want it to be so it's not distracting. For example, here's this one where we shot outside, kind of a greenish, desaturated. They wanted this to be colder, so we used selections. I didn't do this one in Premiere. This is just showing secondaries. Okay, so, oh, I see. Haha, I had a video here. Okay, so you can see how it has the triangle. Those all look very similar. It looks super weird. My kids will come in sometimes when I'm doing this and they're like, Dad, the guy looks weird. And you're like, well, it's just showing me the area of the image I'm going to now be adjusting and affecting, and all the other white areas what I'm not selecting, okay? Anyway, so you do this, and then you have the cold color, but then you've brought back the skin tone to balance against that, so he looks healthy and normal. That was the use case in this situation. Here's one where this was the raw, this was the primary. Problem is, all these LED lights, they didn't have the production to change out all the tubes in the overheads, and so it's this green, yucky green cast. And so we went in DaVinci, you can see a little bit, you've got the little triangle things, again, very similar, selecting just the green, and you can see kind of up in the middle node, it looks all kind of splotchy. It's selecting just all those green colors, switching that back more, okay. Switching that back more to magenta. Let me show you something bigger. Here's the original, basic, switching the green, and then the final grade. Just trying to balance that back out and look normal, right? Here's one just overall. Here's a before of a scene. Oh yeah, there you go. Before or after, balancing out the whole scene. All right, we can keep. All right, this is my last example, I guess, here, and then we can. This is all the befores. So now I'll explain why I missed my white balance thing, because it was correct as the sun came in, the sun went down, I had to put a light, bounced into that window to fake a sunlight. I forgot to white balance once I lost the sunlight, used film lights. That's why this image got all orange. We were in a hurry, small crew budget, okay? But then we had to balance it all out and make it all match. All right, I do have, this is a QR code to my YouTube channel. I have a full breakdown, Show Me the Father I did on documentary. There's a whole lot of behind the scenes that I haven't put into this session. It's 40 minutes. There's another one on color grading the multicam stage production, which I was talking about with all the strong colors. And for that one, like instead of using adjustment layers, and I'd already used up all my groups in DaVinci, and I still needed to do things, I started using versions as a way of grouping shots together. And I think on one, because they didn't shoot the production straight through with 5 cameras. They shot it sometimes with 3 cameras, sometimes with 5 cameras, and they do retakes, and they do different scenes, and it would be different days. And so you had to find a way to break it all up. All right, I feel like it's getting more complicated. It was complicated. I had to figure, so I started using versions, and in one of them I got up to like 52 versions or something, and then I could pick which shots used which version. So anyway, that one was just kind of an interesting, complicated one that I came up with something as a solution. So I made a video about it. There's a color reel on there, and there's also Disciples in the Moonlight, which is about a 20-minute video that gets more in depth with that one. We used secondaries because they had LED flashlights, and they were cheaper, and they were green, and they're running through the woods, and they stop, and they're doing like this. The actress's face looks like a goblin, and of course that's not flattering to the actress, and they're like, we got to fix this as it's going all over, and you had to do magic mask inside of DaVinci, and it's getting obscured by all the fog, and it can't track it. And so anyway, we did some fun things in that one as well, trying to balance that out and match it all together. And that was just fun because it's a darker, lower tone than a lot of Christian films take. It's different. It's just different than Show Me the Father. Some of those not right, not wrong, just was true to that story and what the director and DP wanted. So that was really fun to play in that world of a kind of a grittier tone. So there's some fun things in there too. Yes?
Have you ever had a situation where no matter what you try or what tools you used, you just could not get it the way you wanted? And in that case, what do you do then?
I'm trying to think if there's a time when we absolutely hit the wall. Part of it is having a conversation with, I'm going to say your client, director, whoever it may be, to have realistic expectations. You cannot save a project. And there are limits to, like, sometimes the one shot that was too dark in the library. There's only so much you can do with it. I'm not a wizard, so understanding what it was, what it is, what it could be, how far, how close, and then trying to have a realistic conversation of what's acceptable, and say, I'm doing my best. Here's what we're doing. At some points, it's like your option is to reshoot it. If you want a different shot or something. But I try to exhaust everything else. Or if that's the problem, sometimes we talk about bringing the rest of the scene down, so it doesn't stand out. Like what are the creative options then to make it blend and feel normal? And if they're just like, no, it can't be, okay, well, then what else can we do? Someday, you hit a limit to the tools at some point, yeah. Yes?
So storage spaces do you often export to when you're, so like RGB for screens or like I think 168s for projectors, stuff like that. Is it common to do like a bunch of different exports for different situations, or?
I would say Hollywood, yes. Independent world, no. In my experience, even delivering for theater, a lot of people do P3 D65, or you may do D60. I had never heard of those terms at one point, and I got a headache trying to figure out how to learn that because I couldn't find anybody to answer these questions. Like it's not a common thing. You just search YouTube, and I didn't know what I was trying to find. So it can be very confusing. It is common in the big world to do P3 for theater, and then they'll do Rec 709 for streaming, or they'll do it for other, disc if they're still doing that. And other applications. Yes, they do like a home version and a theater version. Not in the indie world. They barely got budget to just do one. And it does work. I mean, I always deliver Rec 709 2.4. And even doing the Kendrick's doc, which was going to theater, and we're like, I mean, it's Sony, and they're sending you all these notes, and you're like, what are we doing? And they go, the guy who's in charge of post soup was just like, nah, we're not doing it. Because the spec sheet said like, we want P3, we want blah, blah, blah. And I said, what are we doing? And he goes, no, we're doing 70924. Just give me that. ProRes, 4x, whatever it is, And it's, I'm like, well, I want to know what that looks like. You went like that. I didn't have my monitor there, obviously, to compare. But I'm like, no, that was Steven's face. That's the other guy's face. This is the footage. I mean, it felt exactly the way we expected. Same thing with Disciples in the Moonlight. And that one went with Fathom. And I sat with the DP at a screening, and like the first image came up, and I leaned over and said, it's exactly what I still get nervous every time you go, like, I sure hope the theater doesn't goof it up, And it's like, nope, that's what we thought it would be. And it works. It's just a container, really, of what and it looks fine. Again, bigger budgets are going to care a little differently. Yes?
How do you receive those huge, massive, media files?
Hard drive. How do I receive, sorry, I'm not doing a good job repeating these questions, am I? How do I receive huge, massive media files? Hard drive.
So UPS ship it to
Yep, clients will ship them to me. The smaller projects, we can just do downloads. I just had a one that we're doing. It's going to be like I think a national rollout commercial or something for social media stuff. And that one was just like a 30-second thing. They had, 15, 20 clips. Most of them had VFX applied already, so they just sent that one to me. I downloaded it. It's just, 18 gig or something. In that case, I wasn't dealing with all the raw either. But yeah, the movies and stuff, it's a hard drive. You just plug them in. Any other questions? Oh, we're at 3:30. Any last question? Okay, well, I can talk to you guys in a minute. Anyways, all right. Thank you guys for coming, and feel free to reach out anytime. I'm happy to try to answer questions, and I'm here to help. Thank you guys.